Hey everybody, I'm back. You're back with the art and science of difficult conversations. I'm here with Lucy. Lucy, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. It's been a pretty busy week, but I'm happy. So
But
I'm
things
here
calm
now.
down, right?
They're calming down. I'm excited for tomorrow and the weekend. And I'm excited for our conversation today because it sounds like we are gonna do something a little bit differently today. How are
Yeah,
you doing before we jump in there?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I had a busy day, and I just came from facilitating a workshop on difficult conversations to this leadership
Nice.
group,
So you're fresh
and
now.
just fresh,
You're on
just
roll.
talked about it. They asked a lot of good questions, and I
Nice.
think they're a little bit more comfortable, but we'll see because we have part two in a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
Uh,
Good for
exciting.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're listening, you're like, what is this third voice that you're listening, that you're hearing, this mystery
Somebody's
guest?
laughing.
And I want to be clear, we talk a lot on this show about how to have good communication, how to communicate well, live better. And sometimes the question is there such thing as too much communication? Can you really have too much? But let's bring in our guest to talk about that. And so, Ahad, it's great to have you here. I don't want to speak too much for you because it's your story. So, could you share with our listeners kind of who you are and where you're at?
Of course, thank you so much for the introduction, Chris. Before I get into it, I think just you guys were talking about it as well. I think it just feels like in general that life is just running really fast. Like
Mm.
it's like you're working too much and you just don't want to stop. You're like, let me pick up on something else. Let me try something else. Let me build something else. So I completely feel you, Lucy. I feel you that it's busy sometimes. So that is something I wanted to start off with. But my name is Ahad, and I am from the Netherlands. I am living in the Netherlands. Ethnically, I am from Pakistan. I moved here 5 years ago. I've been working as a data consultant for almost 8 years now. And I have been training and coaching organizations mostly on the data side for almost 5 years now as well, since I moved here to the Netherlands. So, data is a very interesting thing because data is truth to some people. So just like how you and I and all of us we discuss about communication being key and how we need to really stress on that. For some organizations, data is really key. And from there, I really started thinking about, okay, but what are you trying to do with the data that you have? My job is to get you the data. My job is to explain the data. But at the end, what are you doing with the data? You're trying to make decisions with the information that you get from the data. So it's mostly decision making and critical thinking rather than anything to do with data, right? You just take your information in communication, you do the same. You ask questions, you talk to people to gather the information, and then you come to a decision. It could be a decision whether you want to have a fight or not. It could be a decision whether you want to discuss if it's important enough or not, etc., etc. So, because of my experience as a data consultant, I started getting into communication and conversations and philosophy in general and understanding more about ourselves and why we do what we do. And that is where I have my podcast, which you came on a few months ago, where we had this conversation about difficult conversations. And since then, I've been really, really walking and talking and thinking all about communication. And let me hear to you today for a very nice conversation that I don't want to spoil already. So I will now pass it over to you to explain to us a little bit about what we're going to be talking today.
Yeah. I would love to just learn a little bit more also is your wife Pakistani?
No, no, she is Dutch. She's Afghan ethnically, but she's been raised in the Netherlands her whole life.
Oh, so as a
Yeah.
little, I'd love to just dive a little bit, just a little quick tangent. What's
Yeah.
that been like in terms of navigating cultural differences and all that? Because it's just inherent in relationships and what we'll talk about later.
Definitely. In general, I think not just in multicultural, but also in general, like relationships are already very difficult and complex. And then you add the cultural element into it that you guys are not on the same page because you guys think differently, your worldview is different, your lens is different. And that really just adds more spice to the soup, right? And it just makes things a
Yeah.
bit more confusing. But before I explain my point of view, I wanted to ask from both of you, I know that you are a homogenous couple. Chris, I'm assuming, of course, I don't know. But are you also multiculti or you're homogenous? Both
Yeah,
of
my
you.
wife is white, so
Oh, okay. So you also have a multiculti
yep,
relationship. I remember from our conversation something else. So I'm sorry for that.
it's all
But yeah,
good.
you also are in the same boat
Yep.
than me. And Lucy, what about you? If you have
Um,
a relationship.
I also had multicultural relationship.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yes.
then basically I'm happy and very comfortable that you guys will understand a little bit about what I'm trying to say, because a lot of people
Yes.
don't. When I talk to my expat friends here, they all get so confused. They're like, "Are we all feeling the same thing?" And I'm like, "I think we are." And then the local people don't really understand it, because for them it's something else. You leave a country, you come here, you start new, and you don't start anew because of a job. You start anew because of a person. That really changes the worldview of why you came here. If you came here for a job and you're finding yourself, you're making your own friends, it's something else. But you come here and you find a partner, that's why you came here. So your world revolves around your partner. So I think that element really makes the relationship a bit more complex than it needs to be, because then the whole identity of yours really is defined by your relationship, because why else are you here? I'm not a data consultant per se. I moved here for her. I did not move here for data, right? I found
Mm-hmm.
data as a way
Mm-hmm.
to pay the bills so that I could be with her, right? It's simple as that. I got into this career 8 years ago because I met her and I was like, I need to pursue a career that will make me get to her as soon as possible. And data was a career that was so lucrative at that time. I was like, sounds interesting. Let me jump into this. And that's why I came where I came. So it already becomes very difficult that your relationship is already skewed and so heavy because of the expectations you have. And you
Mm-hmm.
add on top of that the cultural differences of how she thinks cleanliness is very different from what I think cleanliness is. She thinks communication is very
Yeah.
different from what I think communication is, right? She thinks how to handle children, because now we have a little 1 year old. So how to handle babies for her is very different than how I would expect to handle my baby, because I was raised in a very rough and tough environment of Pakistan where people didn't have time. So they
Mm.
really didn't care much. They were just like, you're a kid, you're alive, you're eating food, you're sleeping. That's more than enough. You get that. You get all the love, of course, but with that also comes a lot of the other stuff. But here you try to shelter your kid. You just give them 24/7 love. And I work from home so that I can be here with her. I turn down opportunities when people tell me, can you come to the office? And I'm like, no, I want to be with my kid. So that also really makes a difference. Even with that much
Mm.
effort that I'm putting in, sometimes I get feedback that I don't think you're there for her enough, and I'm like, my God, you didn't see my dad, right? I think for her a lot for that perspective. So I think that really makes it a bit more complex, because it's very difficult
Mm.
for you to empathize with the other person, because you just
Yeah.
don't know how. Yeah. So for you as well, I don't know. Of course, I will let you speak for yourself, but it's very difficult for you to empathize with the other person when they're from a very different culture than you, because you're like, yeah, I don't know what they're even feeling. So I would toss the question over to you and maybe learn a little bit from your experience of a multicultural
I
relationship, Chris.
yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I was just having this conversation the other week with her and our sister-in-law and our brother, and because we have two kids, we have a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I have a brother that we fought all the time, and we got like real fist fights. Like, we got
Yeah.
into fighting, and
Yeah.
her and her brother, my wife and her brother, like they never fought. Like they got along well enough that they just like left each other alone.
Yeah.
And so when our kids fight, I'm like, let it go. Let's see what happens. But she's much more likely to like jump in and intervene. And I always have to like hold her back and I say, they'll figure it out. Either way, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, and way bigger than the other. So like they'll definitely figure it out.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that actually I bring that up because I think that's really related to what we're talking about today, which is, like I said earlier to the in the show, is we talk about communication. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about something so it doesn't bother us and have a better relationship. But is there a such thing as too much communication? Is it then because can it then become nagging or just onerous to keep having these difficult conversations, which can take energy and stress to think about and prepare for
Yeah.
and plan and get into?
Yeah. Indeed, I think, and I know this is not really the most nicest thing to say, in the sense of we have come so far in the world of mental health and in the world of progress and communication, that you go like, why would you want to go back to a world where there was no communication ahead? Why would you want to turn back? But I look at the example of instant communication like social media, and we see the problems that has as well. It works really well, but it also has its backdrops. And I think in that case, this also is a very interesting thing, that maybe what we have is not the right thing, but that doesn't mean it's completely bad. I think there's really good elements in
Hmm.
it that we can take and then also think about the other elements that we can go. Lucy offline shared some ideas that I really, really enjoyed. So before I even get into it, I want her to like tell me a little bit or tell us a little bit about those ideas so that I can already start pushing back or share my share my opinion or something. So
Pushing
before
back.
Nice. I'm
before
excited.
so before yeah, of course I give the space. I maybe want to introduce the topic. So Chris, you already know what the topic was about. It's too much communication. And my plan is to think about a world where you learn to ignore, right? A world where you think maybe it's okay that we don't need to talk about every single thing, because
Mm,
it's okay to be in a relationship where you love each other a lot and you realize the shortcomings of each other and you are okay with that. And I think in a world right now, we don't feel like we're okay with that because it's about me first. I want to be content. I want to share my feelings. I want to do everything.
mm,
But a relationship is not you. A relationship is a compromise. That means sometimes you won't get what you want. But we train ourselves thinking, no, it's not about I want. It's not about I want to get what I want. It's about I need to be content with what I get. But that's also not true. You don't need to be content. It's okay for you to be annoyed. It's okay for you to be pissed that it's not going to be your turn this time.
mm.
And that's fine because in the other way, they will also get a time when they don't get to choose because they'll be like, shit, it's a compromise. They gave me the last one, I'll this one, and I'm not happy about it. I don't need to be content with it. It's okay, I'm mad. I'm gonna go into my room, I'm gonna not talk to you for a whole day, and I'm gonna figure it out. We're gonna go back to normal tomorrow. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's okay. As long as you have the base of communication clear and understand what you want, what you need from each other, and it is not chronic, these little fights over things like dishes, over things like who does the laundry, who does the cooking, who took out the trash last time. These are some menial things that it feels like you're wasting energy if you are talking about
Mm,
properly, if you're talking about those kind of problems. As I said, if it's chronic, if it's like I can give you a very good example from my own life. If it's a thing that I think you're just very messy to the extent of I don't want to say vandal or but I destroy furniture a lot. That's my wife's complaint. I destroy furniture a lot. She's like, you are so reckless that you don't see that you spill oil on wood, or you don't see that
mm,
you scratch something, or you see this. And I'm like, you're right. I need to improve that. It's not nice that we buy expensive furniture and I break it all the time. I will replace it as my form of repayment or compromise to the relationship. She's like, yeah, but you can't keep replacing everything every few months or every few years. You need to learn to get
mhm,
better. That's fine. That's fair. That's an important conversation to have because that's a skill I need to learn to be just more responsible a little bit. Same goes for the other way around. There are some things about her I'll be like, I see this coming up again and again and again. Can we think of a better way to do this? But if there's a little trivial things like you dropped this, or why did you say that to me, or this happened. Me and my wife today were looking for each other for 25 minutes after a swimming lesson because apparently there was another door the other side, and I did not know. So I was waiting on this side of the door, and she was waiting on that side of the door
mm.
for 25 minutes. And then I went on the other side after asking people. They told me there's another door on that side. Did you not know that? I'm like, no. And then I go to the other side, and she's really fuming. She's like, where are you? It's been 25 minutes. I'm like, where are you? And then we're both mad at each other the whole car ride home. And I was like, let it be.
Mm.
Let it be. It is not important enough to have a fight, to talk about it. You're mad, be mad. It's allowed, you know. And that's what I want to basically talk about today.
Yeah. Now, Lucy, I can't expect you to speak for all women, but can you speak for all women, please? Just kidding. No, but yeah, Lucy, I'd love to hear your thoughts because I think you said something really insightful before we started recording
Yeah, yeah.
about this.
Let me remember what I said.
Oh,
So, is too much communication, can it be such thing as too much communication? And I believe what I said is depends on what we define communication as, and I look at it as a tool. And it depends on how we want to use the tool, when we want to use the tool, and what we want to accomplish. And in a relationship, how do we know what if too much communication is too much communication? When is that boundary? I think we need to ask ourselves first the question a little bit deeper, what kind of relationship we want to have. And I would say I would make a distinction between communication among people and also our internal communication. And I would say when we communicate internally within ourselves better, we can also communicate better with the other person. Because in order for us to communicate with the other person, we need to first communicate with ourselves and ask ourselves, what is the relationship I want to have? How do I want to feel in my marriage? What are my needs? And then I also heard you, you know, people are now more selfish about mine. That's a valid concern. And yes, a relationship probably cannot actually work when it's just about one person's needs. A relationship, what kind of relationship I want to have, let's say the definition could be when both of our needs matter. And when we find a way of a win-win situation where we don't have to compromise and then feel resentful, but really find a way, co-create it together, so both of us can be happy in this relationship. And then asking a question, having that internal communication. What does need to happen for me so that I'm happy? What kind of communication do I need? How often? So I would encourage, at least this is my perspective, really having the first communication inside. And then also when too much communications feels like too much communication, could be, what does the other person try to accomplish by saying this so many times? I am doing a new program, Tai Chi and Qigong, and my Sifu from my martial arts studio actually shared an example how when we don't have, in a way, the internal communication and the communication on the outside doesn't work, when we don't get why the other person is telling us, and we say, it's just too much communication, does that make sense? About the toilet seat, from a perspective of women, you probably heard that women don't like when the guys leave the toilet seat up.
Yeah.
And let's say the wife then keeps nagging, you just did it again, and it can repeat for many months. And then maybe she doesn't say anything anymore. Till then it kind of starts combining. And that one irritation, because it didn't get resolved, or the woman doesn't feel she was heard, it can start building up. And when the communication doesn't resolve it, when she doesn't even talk to herself, what's really bothering me about this toilet seat? Is it really the toilet seat that I get wet when I forget at night and I don't see that it's not there? And it's like, oh my God, I sit on somebody else's pee maybe? Or is it really like I feel not cared about? I feel that my needs don't matter. I feel I don't have the voice in the relationship. So if she doesn't have that conversation within herself, then she cannot even communicate that to the guy and say, you know, it's not about the toilet seat, but it's about actually when that happens, this is how I perceive this. I actually don't feel respected in our relationship. And then the brain can, and if she doesn't have the conversation within herself, with the other person, and just keeps saying, this is the toilet seat, oh my God, then 10 months, she will start collecting, her brain will start collecting the proof. He doesn't like me. He doesn't care about me. Oh, I see it in this one. And then the guy is so surprised 10 months from now, there's been quiet. It's going to be an explosion. And she's going to list all the reasons why she feels you don't love her.
Yeah.
Right. But you've mentioned, I'm going to say one quick thing before I give you word. You've mentioned data, that a lot of people, and especially there's the you know, the kind of the generalization, guys are more analytical, women are more emotional. Usually the data is connected to the analytical things. I would claim also emotions have data.
Yeah.
And if we don't know how to read that data,
Yeah.
we can be completely lost.
Yeah.
And so,
100%.
and in order to understand that emotional data, we need to learn how to communicate that data to ourselves and to others. So that's, I wanted, so what's coming up for you when you hear this?
Let me take your example of the toilet seat and the communication within ourselves. Your example was very nice because that example shows you what I'm trying to say very clearly. It's just that our lens of looking at it is very different. So your lens again was, is it the toilet seat, or is it that I feel that my needs are not being met? But why do you feel your needs are not being met? Why do you think it's important enough? Because if your needs were not being met by just one toilet seat, then it wouldn't be just one toilet seat. It would be a lot of other things. If that toilet seat is the start of you starting to gather proof, that means that is the point you decide that, okay, this is the story I have in my head, and now I'm going to start focusing on it. But there must be, because you're together for 24 hours a day, excluding sleeping and working and everything. There must be other times when you're interacting where you do feel loved, or else it won't take you that long, or else it won't be just one thing. And that's what I mean. Sometimes in a relationship, it's not about you, it's about the other person. And for me, taking that example very typically, it's like, I forgot to put the seat down. I'm sorry, I'll try better next time. But you can also just put the seat up. Or said, yeah, you can put the seat down, right? Or you can put the seat up when you're done. So it could be the other way around as well. And that's what I mean, that relationships will have friction. It's by design, it's by default. You will have friction, you will have problems, and you will communicate about them. That's very important. As I said in the start, I don't think the solution is to not do what Lucy's saying and not talk about it at all. The solution is to talk about it, but till an extent. Because me and my wife, for example, know each other for 10 years now. So we have talked about any possible thing that you can talk about, but still we have problems. We have things that we go like, and this is not the thing that is a big thing. It is the thing that is recurring all the time. Then you just go like, if it's recurring and it's been 10 years and I still choose to be with this person, that means it's not that important. If it was a deal breaker, if it was that important, then I wouldn't be spending 10 years with this person, right? So it's all about pros and cons. And that's what I'm trying to say. What we're looking for is a world where there is 0% con and 100% pro, and that is the relationship we're going for. But no, there will be more. It just needs to be more than 50%. That means it's worth it. And maybe that's my analytical mind thinking, right? That I'm thinking in that very typical manner, that it's that simple. And yes, it's not like your emotions don't matter. Your emotions matter. Scream, fight. Those are emotions. Talking about it is not just the only emotion. That's why I say scream, fight, shut down if you want. That's all fair. That's all fair game in a relationship. I don't want to be in a relationship where all we do is come sit down and, hey, Chris, I did not like what you said, and let me tell you why. No, I want you to scream. I want you to be like, Chris, I hate it. I did not like this. Why are you like this? And it's fine. I let it out. I let out the system. And as the other person, I realize they're letting it out. I shouldn't take this personally. They're letting it out. And that's where, for me, the power of communication comes in, that I am comfortable in my own skin. I talk to myself a lot. I don't have any insecurities, but I don't project them on the other person. Because in that example, again, Lucy, what you're doing is you're building a story in your head regarding someone else's actions, right? It's something out of your control. It's not you, it's someone else. They're doing this. They must be thinking this. This is the thing. Be comfortable in your own skin and let them be comfortable in their own skin, and just go. let life happen, right? Let just life happen, and it'll always happen. And that's where I try to go, because for me, I see like it's somewhere like a hedonic treadmill of sort, that you're just chasing happiness, you're chasing contentment. And we have been thinking these days that that will only be possible if you're 100% in tune with your body, with your mind, with your communication. That is the way to happiness. And when I see my mom, who's been living in a relationship of what, 35, 40 years now, and my dad and my mom were from a different generation. Domestic abuse was common, screaming at each other was common, everything was common. But I look at it now after so many years, and I look at my grandmother after so many years. My grandmother says, I hate your grandfather. I don't like him. I didn't have a choice. If I could dump him, I would dump him right now. My mother, on the other hand, says, I love your dad a lot. I'm like, but mom, you know what you've been through, right? Like, you know. She's like, yeah, but compromise is relationship. That literally it is. I compromise a lot. And now he's compromising. He's weak. He's old. He's depending on me. I do whatever I want, and he has to put up with it. And that's fine, because now it's my time. And that's what a relationship is. So that's maybe my Eastern mindset clouding my judgment. But that is what came in my head when I was sharing this example.
You know what's interesting is I think everything you shared, I think it calls back to that internal communication that Lucy's even talking about, right? Like, how important is this to me? And is this the deal breaker? Is this the most important thing? Or is this a mild annoyance and I have to, I have to learn to live with it. I think nothing's to be perfect, but there's that mild, is it worth having that conversation over? Lucy said the idea that communication is a tool, and I had to write that down because I thought it was a good soundbite. Mm-hmm. But also, I think that goes back to, if I'm going to talk to you, like, you left the toilet seat up again. If I'm talking to you, right? Do I really want you to change that, or am I just venting? And that's two different things. If I want you to change a behavior, maybe that is worth a conversation. That's like, you can't do this anymore. Versus, I'm just frustrated. Do I need to have that conversation? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But do I that's two different goals altogether from the conversation.
I want to go back for a moment when you've mentioned, building a story in our head and kind of focusing just on our needs. Yes, all of us are in a way we are meaning making machines, all of us. And that's why the communication is, in my opinion, important, because when somebody pauses, reflects, this is happening. He keeps putting keeping the toilet seat up. I am making it mean that he really doesn't care about my needs. He doesn't care if I sit on a pee or not. And how annoying it is for me at night when I'm super tired. Let's say a breastfeeding mom, when she's already exhausted, maybe she doesn't care at that point. But, or that could be that one thing that this is at least one thing you could do for her. And that's really important. And that would provide for her that she feels supported by you. And let's say she communicates that. What would that provide for you? So it's not about that toilet seat one thing, but anytime she sits and it's down, she will feel loved. So it's like communicating, how does she feel loved? And saying also, this is what I'm making it mean. That's another. And is this what you mean? And then, you can answer, right? What does it mean to you? And then you say, okay. And actually your relationship could get deeper because you try to communicate and discover each other's inner worlds. And you also mentioned other thing about the culture. I'm coming from this background. This is where screaming, shouting is normal and people still make it work. And then it's your communication. Do I want to live like this? Yeah, this is fun. This is part of like how, right? And now it depends on your wife if she is comfortable. For some people, they could have been abused and they said, I don't want to have a family like that. I don't want, when somebody screams, it triggers my survival brain. I'm so anxious. I'm afraid. I'm fearful. I cannot be myself. So then these partners with different communication styles, where for one, it's normal. For the other one, it creates like a trauma response. That's not going to work.
Exactly.
So, and that comes to like internal communication and then communicating. And I'm hearing our conversation maybe is about where's the boundary of when communicating too much is too much and it's not serving the right purpose.
Yes, indeed. As I said from the start, I am not against communication. It is a tool, but it is not the only tool. And that's where my focus is going, because what I see is being branded and marketed as the only tool, the tool to get through difficult conversations, the tool to do this, the tool to do that. And what I'm trying to say is that the messiness of life is also a part of life, because as you said, emotions are data, right? And just you can communicate those emotions, but you can also communicate the raw emotions. You don't need to think about it. And that I'm the difference I'm making is about thinking. I'm not saying emotions should be suppressed. I'm saying thinking needs to be suppressed, because when we rationalize, we can rationalize everything. Lucy, we can rationalize war. We can rationalize anything in the world if you want to rationalize. There was a study done almost 15 years ago. I will send it to you if you guys want to put it in the link, which said that we established the tool, the skill to reason. Like we developed reason just to win arguments, not to think and become better. The research said that the only reason we learned how to reason and explain and do everything is because we want to convince other humans who were there with us to do what we want them to do for survival. So it was always about winning arguments. So when you try to rationalize anything, you will rationalize it. And this is something I see myself happening a lot. When I'm mad or something, I just sit back. I'm like, because we're doing similar things. So I've been through the same training process, and I know what I've been taught, that let it slow down, type 2 thinking, take a break, breathe in. I do all of those things. And what I realized after that is that almost 99% of the time, I'm just okay. I'm like, it was that, but if I think about it, then, but you know what? It was not that big a deal. But that happens with every single thing, every single thing. Then I just realized that this is me over rationalizing everything, because you don't need to over rationalize. You need to feel those emotions. And the other person also needs to hear those emotions sometimes. Because if I let it think in my skill, I'm a person who doesn't get angry at all, because I have the skill of over rationalizing myself. I'm like, doesn't matter. It's not that important. If I'm really mad about something, then it's a deal breaker, as I said in the start, right? The deal breaker, then I wouldn't be with you for 10 years, right? And this from this part, I want to take you to the conversation that you had about the toilet seat and how you feel your needs are being met, that you feel loved. But that's what I'm trying to say, that one thing makes you feel like you're not being loved, but there are 99 other things happening in the day that the other person is consciously doing, which you ignore. And that's why when the toilet seat also, the problem goes away. You will not feel loved. I can guarantee you, after a few weeks of the toilet seat being in the same place again, you will take it for granted. Because that's how humans are. We look for problems. We look for things to think about. We look for this. 99% of the time, life is going well, but I'm going to focus on that one thing. My job is not going really well, or something is not going really well. We are tuned to fear. We're tuned to stress. We're tuned to those things rather than something else. But I do see, Lucy, you want to say something. So, yes.
Lucy's got some thoughts.
I have some thoughts,
Yeah.
but I want to give you, Chris, opportunity too before I
Yeah.
jump in with the thoughts.
Hey, Chris here. I really appreciate you listening to this podcast. And if you are listening to this podcast because you're looking to get better at these difficult conversations, well, if you really want to de-escalate difficult behaviors and you want to be assertive without being aggressive and being true to yourself, I have a self-paced course that can really help you, because I know it's difficult being assertive in lots of different situations. If you're at work and you have to give feedback, if you have to deliver bad news to an employee, or deliver bad news to somebody that you care about in your personal life, or you're struggling to deal with defensive or sensitive people who are pushing your buttons and you don't know how to push back. It doesn't have to be that way. There is a world where you can handle these tough emotions with confidence. You can speak honestly and kindly while you're still being assertive. And you have the ability to manage emotional outbursts and stubbornness calmly, because these are things that I've had to overcome and learn. And so this self-paced course goes through all of those things. I've created this trust framework that helps you think through how to prepare for and how to facilitate hard conversations. And you hear a lot of it actually in this podcast as I talk about how to handle difficult conversations in lots of different scenarios. Currently, the course is closed for enrollment. There's a waiting list. If you are interested in learning more, enrollment will open up at the end of August and the beginning of September. So please go to the website. I'll link it down below, and you can learn more about it and join the waiting list if you want to hear more about it. But I'd love to see you there. No. You have much stronger thoughts than me, I think, about what's going on here.
I'm loving
From the
Chris,
position of a woman.
You're the best host.
I'm noticing a lot of energy from you, Lucy, about
you,
this
Chris.
topic.
Yes, I have some thoughts there.
Yeah.
So I would start with what I like about what you're sharing. I think this a lot of listeners probably are feeling the same way, and they say, yeah, sometimes it's best not to talk, especially in the situations about nothing. And when you mention rationalizing, that we are, communication was a tool to win arguments, I believe you mentioned. And I would say that's one of the functions, yes, to help us function better, to help us survive. And I would say that's one level of understanding of our communication and being and relationships. And one, I think I'm passionate about this topic because of emotions. Emotional intelligence is one of my passions, my topics that I love to learn more about because I see what kind of difference it can make. You actually, there is in one of there's Genos, emotions and intelligence company. They have assessments, and one of the criteria for looking at where people are. So it's not only the normal intelligence we say but it's also emotional intelligence that actually can be even more powerful. And one of the aspects of the markers is emotional reasoning. And actually the situation when you describe, people just over rationalize that, or people make just limited decisions. I would say yes. And this is described, at least in that, as unproductive, actually, emotional reasoning. When the productive emotional reasoning, when it shows a higher emotional intelligence, it means when we make decisions, we take in consideration both data, physical data, as well as our emotional data. So we actually, high emotional intelligence in that aspect means we make very wise decisions. We take in consideration our feelings. We also take into consideration possible biases that our brain can play on us. We take in consideration the real life data. And then we make decisions. And when making the decision and as a leader communicating those decisions, we also take consideration how we communicate. So we don't want to communicate probably from anger, which could trigger some survival response from other people. But we also want to be mindful of how the other people might be receiving the message. Let's say a doctor sharing some health diagnosis to a patient. If they're just matter of fact, or to a family member, yeah, your sibling is dying or your parent is dying. Yeah, well, it might be 3 days. Any other questions? How that might feel to somebody receiving that news. That doctor probably doesn't have a high emotional intelligence, because that doctor wouldn't take into consideration the feelings and the situation of who they are communicating to. So high emotional intelligence actually means taking into consideration both the data and the emotions, and being aware when the emotions are too strong, when we actually cannot think straight, taking the time. And so my argument here in our discussion, where's the boundary? I would say we need to get our survival brain under control first, calm down, and then we will see where the boundary is, because we make decision from the smarter part of the brain, not from our survival brain. So I will say the strategy to know the boundary is basically calm down first, then the answer will appear. So what's coming up for you?
I'll add two thoughts. Is I appreciate that is Lucy, is like that calming down that brain, that part of your brain that's overly activated. I'll add that also physical safety should also be really a priority for people to be thinking about, right? Like,
Great point. Especially for
I think
us
that's one
women.
of the especially for women, and for anybody too, right? Because guys can get abused as well.
That's true too. Absolutely.
And it's overlooked plenty of times. And so I think it's
You're right.
important to think about physical safety. That's number one, outside of emotional or rational safety. It's like, are you physically safe? Do you feel physically safe in the space that you're at? And then second, the only thing I'll push back on is you bring up that I think of like, if one thing that this person does is, you don't feel loved versus the 99 things, I would say that can be true if they're all weighted equally. That's the only thing that I would add to that, is that not all 100 things are weighted equally, right? Like, maybe the toilet seat, maybe that's very inconsequential. Let's put something else. Let's say like every time I give you an idea, you dismiss it. That weighs a lot heavier. Even if that's the only thing, that weighs a lot more than just a toilet seat. So you may always put the toilet seat down. You always put coasters down. You always buy me like little trinkets, or just respect my property. And those are all like very minor things compared to, you never take my opinion into account. Like, that's like, right. So I think there's an important factor of how much is weighted, and it's gonna be different for everybody, right? Everybody's different in terms of what's important to them. What we were talking about, like different values and different kind of how we view the world. But I would just add that to your model of like how much, positive versus negative things are happening in the relationship as well.
Yeah, indeed. This is why I say that that's a concept of deal breaker in my head, right? If one person dismisses your idea once, sure. If they dismiss it again, sure. They dismiss it again, you want to talk about it. You're like, hey, look, this is not working. Again, nothing can be chronic. That I completely agree. I'm talking about, and I'm especially talking about relationships here. So Lucy's examples, a lot of them were like EQ and doctors, and which are pretty fair examples. But I want to bring the conversation to the relationship, because that's what my point is. That EQ and everything that is needed for people to understand each other. But if you've been together for 10 to 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, you understand each other. And that's what I'm trying to say, that you understand each other. And if you don't understand each other, if you don't, there are different choices. My mom's case is very different. She was not economically independent. She had to survive, right? So this can be also recency bias in her head, that, oh, I think my life is good. Completely agree. See, me over-rationalizing again. I understand 100% that she was being economically dependent on my dad.
Let me jump in there, because as a guy that loves data, I think you are confusing correlation there, because you're assuming that just because people have been together for 25 years, they have a strong connection.
No,
right?
Yes, there's an assumption.
Right. Because like I also work as a therapist, and I've worked with plenty of couples who've been together for 25 years, and the guy comes to me and they're like, what's going on here? Like, how come this is like, how come she's never brought this up before, this idea or this thing? Um and then we talk, and he's like, oh yeah, she's been talking about this like for whatever, like our entire relationship. And
Yeah,
so I think just because you have the longevity doesn't always equate to they do know each other, and they are connected
100%.
enough to know how to
That,
say what their deal
yeah,
breakers are.
yeah, that could be. That could be. I'm not denying it. But Lucy wants to say something before I defend my position. Lucy, go for it.
Thank you. Two thoughts. One, I wanted to respond to when you've mentioned, we've been together for 10 years. We really know each other. And I want to say to you, ask really, because sometimes what can happen, we assume that we know the other person. I am a different person than I was 5 years ago. There's lots of things that changed. I am a different person than I was last week because I had a big realization like 2 days ago about something.
Yeah.
Right? If I don't communicate that to somebody might assume I would still behave based on in that area, based on my previous self that didn't know the new information, let's say. So I would say that people do change, and our brain, because it tries to conserve energy to be efficient, it makes shortcuts and says, we are the same, we know each other. And I'm encouraging people to actually pause and says, do I really? Am I changing? Maybe there are things that we actually just assume we know, but maybe we really don't know. So there was one point I wanted to make. And quickly, I want to actually have one other one. Where would we want to end our discussion? Would we want to have some takeaways from our listeners? How do we want to co-create this together? Kind of, we didn't ask in the beginning. It's a new experiment in a way here. How do we start closing that? Where do we want to take this? What's coming up for you guys?
Well, I'll just tell you the answer. I know that we've been debating, but I'm just gonna tell you the answer. Just kidding. I think the reality is that in my opinion, it's one of those things where everybody's different. Every case is different. Every relationship is different. And it does involve a little bit of conversation to understand with ourselves first. I think that's where it starts, is our conversation with ourselves of what is my boundary? What do I need? And also weighing, is this something I need to talk about, or is this, and I need a behavior change? I need something different out of this relationship versus I just need to vent. And maybe it's not venting to my partner anymore. Maybe now I just need to vent to a friend about this because in the grand scheme of things, it's not really a big deal. Or maybe I just need to vent to nobody, right? Like when my first kid was born, when my first kid was born, I was like, I took on like purposely. That's just how I show love, is I took on a lot of like the house duties of like cleaning and preparing. And after a while, like 6-7 months into it, it starts wearing on you, right? Because you're still tired, and you're like, why isn't she helping out more? Like, why doesn't she see the need to do this? And I thought about it more, and I was like, it's not really a contest to see who can do the most work. It's really, we have to work at this together. And so I'll just have to keep doing it. And so I think that's kind of what Ahad is also getting at is, and you, Lucy, it's how do we have that conversation with ourselves about like, what are we looking to get out of it? What do we need? Is it just me? And having that conversation, that realization I came to is like, it's not really that big of a deal. Like this stuff needs to get done by one of us. We both need to do it. She's doing stuff. I'm doing stuff. Like, it's just life.
Exactly. I love that. I love that point of view, because that is exactly what I'm saying. I want to scope it down more, because we scoped it down to relationships, but even now we want to scope it down more, because I love that you're a therapist and you already gave me examples of you've been in things, and longevity doesn't really mean happiness. My pushback on that is the fact that we are seeing a trend towards people communicating more than 25 years ago. And when you start communicating more, you start talking about yourself more. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So what you see as a result in therapy is people using a tool that has been provided to them by society, that this is a better tool. And I'm not denying certain cases, most cases could be bad. I'm not denying that. But what I'm trying to say is, if I scope it down to a capable person, capable two people who know themselves really well, right? Who know themselves, who've done the inner working, but they still have friction because they just don't agree with each other on a lot of different things. But they apparently like each other so much that they want to spend time with each other, right? And this goes to your behavior change thing. Even that I don't understand to an extent. Why? Because you chose that person. And if it's not a really, really dangerously bad habit, you chose that person as a whole person. When you are asking for behavior change, you're again asking for yourself. You're not understanding the other person's reason to have that habit. In certain cases, you have to agree. Like, for example, I eat really, really badly. I am in love with food to a very disgusting level of addiction. So it's not good for me. It's not healthy for me. So my wife keeps reminding me, and I always push back and saying, "Hey, it's me. It's who I am. I will work out 6 times a day, 6 times a week, so that I can eat a lot." But that's not how it works. I will still have diseases related to overeating. So I'm like, I need to control it. My wife doesn't do any physical activity because she was born with amazing genes. So I have to remind her every single time that, hey, you need to work out. Even though you look great, you need to work out. It's something healthy. You will feel better. But if I have to talk to her about, oh, why don't you do more? Or why don't you read more? Oh, I want to debate ideas with you. I'm a lot into ideas. You can see already. My wife isn't. She's not into it. She's like, I don't like it. Now, if I was looking for a partner, imagine that I can talk to two people who I know only once in my life, and I'm talking like this, and I cannot talk to my partner like this. You would say that's red flags. Well, you should be able to have the space, but no, the other person also doesn't want that space. So we have to compromise. I go to my friends, I talk there, I share my ideas there. I come home, I talk to my wife, I talk to her about my feelings, about what I want, about what she wants. We do that stuff. But if I want to talk about why democracy is failing in the world, she's not going to listen to me, right? She's going to be like, I don't care enough. And I have to be okay with that. That is what I'm trying to say. It is supposed to be a compromise, that you will not get what you want all the time, because that's how relationships work. So that's what I mean. Okay, for me, this is not going against communication. You have to do that inner working. Yes, what Lucy's saying, what you're saying, that you need to have that inner working. That, are you content or not? Because if you're not content, then those, in my eyes, those 10 years will never happen. The deal breaker will happen even before that, right? So those relationships where those things, they were content. But then because of exposing new relate, and this is me just assuming here, okay? So don't think of it as facts. But what I'm trying to say is that people going through life, and suddenly there's a new, more awareness of mental health, awareness of communication, awareness of yourself, your feelings, especially on the side of women, because women have been always the oppressed person in the relationship. So they're getting some kind of, you can say, suffrage or emancipation, that they're getting more space. So a lot of them are realizing that this is a very toxic relationship. I was never happy here. And that's great. That you do you. Then that means that's a deal breaker. Cut it off. Move on. And that's what I'm looking at. That if once you are comfortable, both of you are comfortable in your own skin, you will still be annoyed at each other. And that's okay. You don't need to talk about it. That's my whole gist.
Yep.
I was talking to my friend who had actually got divorced, and he and I are in a very similar situation. He's an expat. She was a local. I'm an expat. She was a local. And I was sharing with him my problems. Like, I also go through a lot of problems, and he said those are exactly the same problems me and my wife had. And I was like, but you got divorced, and I love my wife to death. What's the difference? He's like, yeah, I was not happy. I'm like, but you were with her for 5 years. He's like, yeah, but her habits. I'm like, yeah, but you chose that, right? Didn't you? So I was explaining to him that idea that you should have a reservoir of resentment, not the one that Lucy says, but you should have a reservoir of resentment, which is for all the little shit that annoys you. And you just keep it there. You're like, it's fine, ignore, it's fine, ignore. But if it gets too much, it's fine. You went, you talked, and then the person listens. And that's also fine. When you were telling me about the fact that I should not vent to my partner because it might feel like different, no, you should vent to your partner. And your partner should understand you that she's or he's just venting. It's fine. I don't need to fix anything. It's just a vent. It has nothing to do with me. Let it go. And that's what I mean. We make everything about ourselves. Our feelings first, our this first, our meaning, what Lucy said, we are meaning creating. Basically, it's all about the story that we tell ourselves. So when a person is venting towards us, it's not about us, but we take it as about us. Again, we like, oh, you're saying about me, so it's about me. Something I no, it's not about you. And that's what I mean to end this rant. Relationships are not about you. It's about a compromise. And that's what I'm trying to say, that if you have two very comfortable people in their skin, there will still be friction. And you don't need to fix that friction by talking about it all the time, because that will just create more friction, because you will realize that you are very different from each other. But that's fine. We need to embrace diversity, as we say with everything, right?
Yeah.
Embrace that you're different. My wife hates most of the stuff that and I say hate with like emphasis. I game, she doesn't like it. I talk about philosophy, she doesn't like it. I like to be overproductive and like I'm working like four things at once. She doesn't like it. She has one job. She's enjoying life. She loves to watch movies. She loves to talk to her friends. She loves to cook. She loves to do those things. And I don't like any of those. I don't have social media on my phone. She hates it. She's like, I want to show you some reels. I'm like, show me on your phone because I don't have it on my phone anyways. Right.
Yeah.
So how can two different people like that still be content with each other? Because my bias since I was born, when my mom said, learn to ignore as long as you're happy together. So you, and from this bias, I've been maintaining this relationship, but then I'm slowly realizing that, oh, it does work. And going to
I
close
think
this
that, well,
conversation.
let me just stop you there because I just wanted to recognize we're at the end of our time together today. I want to be respectful because I think
No.
Lucy has a tough schedule. Yeah, are you
Ah,
do you have
yes.
I have
a
like
hard
5
stop,
minutes.
Lucy?
I can.
Okay, so
Yeah.
because I do think this is a really cool conversation. I think this is a really good conversation, even though I don't know if anybody's listening, they're like, oh yeah, they all kind of agree on the same thing. We're all kind of agreeing with each other on this topic. So it's kind of nice. But I do think it's an interesting conversation. I'd love to have you back to keep talking about this because I think it's worth talking about these intricacies of relationships and communications because that's all we ever talk about here.
Yeah, I would love it. I think you two are amazing conversation partners. So I'm always up for something like this.
Awesome. Where can people find you if they're like, I want to learn more about this guy. I want to learn more about what he's doing and follow him. Where can they find you and follow you and reach out to you?
Well, Instagram, TikTok, and everything is Ahad Budhani, where I just post things that I'm thinking about and these kind of things, usually excerpts from the podcast as well. As I already mentioned that you were on a podcast once, so we actually had a podcast together. So I have my own podcast called the Weekly Vasl with Ahad, and that's on Spotify, YouTube, and everywhere. And basically, what I try to do is I am trying to understand why we do what we do. And you can see from the conversation today that that is what gives me energy of understanding
Yeah.
why we do what we do. And that doesn't mean just why the primitive emotions, but also why these new tools that we're using and we just why we do what we do. So that's what I try to do. And I also have a newsletter where I just share my thoughts. I can send you all the links, and if you want, you can of course
Yeah, please.
pass them to the description, and then they can follow me wherever they are interested in. So looking forward to the next conversation there.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you back for
Awesome.
part two. Love to continue this conversation.
And if I might add, I would love to also invite our listeners or viewers, wherever you listen to us or view us, what came up for you? What you agree with, what you disagree with, any other questions that you might have for our next conversation, please let us know. So we keep this conversation going with the purpose of really discovering more and what works for us and creating better relationships.
Ah, nice.
Better life because they're part
Yeah.
of life.
Yeah.
That's one perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Ahad.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
All right, everybody. I know that there was a lot of good back and forth in that conversation. I want to know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there such thing as too much communication? Are people too sensitive? Or should there be a lot more than is already happening? That could be just case by case, dependent on the person. So let us know. Give us a like, give us a review, give us a comment. Let us know what you're thinking so that we can also chat with you. So we'll see you next week.